Okay, Paul, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Deb. Let me get the slide share to work, and hopefully it will. And hopefully you see the slide now. I'm not sure. Share.
Not yet.
All right. Allow Zoom to share your screen. What have I done wrong here? All right, try again. Okay, did we get it up this time?
Nope, not yet.
Well, we'll try. For some reason, I'm getting a strange picture here, not the one I'm accustomed to when I hit share screen. Let me reduce the other one because that might be what the problem is. My apologies for slowing things down here. Okay, I'll Zoom to share. Well, strangely enough, I don't think I've got it yet.
Nope, not yet.
Well, for some reason. Let's try there. Okay, go ahead with.
Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. My appreciation to you all for joining us this evening for a presentation by our friend and brother Blair Bryant on the covenant relationships. And the fact that he's presented several times previously, primarily on characters document, means that most of us are acquainted with them and appreciative of the remarkable testimony that he has shared. Because he's spoken to us before and he's given us his interpretations, and this time he returns to share about the concept of the covenant relationship. I'm confident that we'll learn again, because not only does he know the scriptures well, but he also is publishing in physics on theory of particle structure, and he's attempting to help us understand the nature of the atom and the nature of creation. So here is one of those remarkable minds that has been stimulated by the restored gospel, and so I'm delighted to welcome him here. So I encourage you to embrace his mind, because he seeks, a bit like Isaac Newton, to interrelate and reconcile the truths of science with those of religion. Join me in prayer, if you would, please. God of love, who extends the promise in the scriptures that those who covenant with you can embrace eternity. We come as mortals, a bit suspicious of our own immortality, curious that our fathers agreed in covenant with you that through us the earth would or could be blessed. How, as we look at it, our failures appear predominant and must be confessed. We hear the earth, our mother, groan with our wars, greed, and pollutions, and wonder, where is blessing for our daughters and our sons? Where is blessing when we corrupt the water, air, and land we rely on? Where is blessing when we neglect the cause of Zion? Yet, in your grace, we trace the promise of your Son, the Christ, who blesses from above, with evidence that you, the creator of the multiverse, on us, your children, with uncompromised love, and see within us evidence of your own investment to be relied upon, evidence that earth, our beautiful home, germinates the seeds of Zion, a place, a people, a purpose, a plan upon which our eternity is built, wherein equity, a global unity, a harmonious resolution to our conflicts can be felt. A people who choose to treat each other with respect. A peaceful purpose we can see when we introspect. A plan laid out from the creation of our world to challenge our agency in which by love our mortality transforms into immortality. Thank you, God, for blessing us with Brother Bryant this evening and his presentation, reminding us as covenant children of our call to be a peaceful nation. In the name of the Prince of Peace, Lord Jesus, we pray. Amen. All right, Brother Bryant, the floor is yours, and welcome to the other people that I did get to greet beforehand. But everyone is welcome in the forum. Blair?
You're still muted, Blair.
Am I unmuted now?
You are unmuted. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to share my screen. We got it yet?
Yes.
Okay. Want to thank you for your prayer, Paul. You mentioned Zion, and that is going to be an important part of this presentation. Most people don't know what Zion is, but well, let's get into it through the covenant. Didn't advance.
Click your second screen to activate.
Click here. And now try.
It's not.
There it went.
There we go. Okay. What is a covenant? A covenant is a binding agreement made by two or more parties, and it can be considered a contract, or as a verb, it is to promise by a covenant. So it's an agreement, legal agreement, and that is, it can be a legal agreement, but the contracts that we're going to look for here are not legal contracts. We have a contract between man and God. My advancing is not working.
It worked that time. Oops.
Okay. What constitutes a covenant people? We know most about the Abrahamic covenant. It is the driving promise of God that runs throughout the Old Testament. But the Jaredite covenant is one we know only through the Book of Mormon. Those that don't know anything about the Book of Mormon, probably not many here, but the Jaredite covenant is only a short book in the Book of Mormon, the Book of Ether. It's very shortened. At any rate, we have two different kinds of covenants that I'm going to be talking about. And I want to compare those two covenants. So let's look carefully at the Abrahamic covenant, which is the first covenant. And this comes from Genesis of the King James Version of the Bible. And the Lord said to Abram, get out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house, and to a land I will show thee, and I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. Now, that's God's part of the covenant. He's directing Abraham to leave Haran, the area where he's been living, and to go to Canaan. And so Abraham responds. Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Abraham was 75 years old. Remember that age, 75, when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarai, his wife, They went forth to the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. And the Lord appeared unto Abram and said, unto thy seed I will give this land. And there builded he, this is Abram, an altar unto the Lord. Now, remembering that a covenant involves two parties, we find that Abram was directed by God to go where God told him to go to Canaan. And Abram responded by building an altar to God and then going to Canaan. Now, 11 years later, Abram had done a lot of moving around the Bible, and he'd gone twice to Egypt to escape famine. And yet, when he next meets God, Abram complains, you've given me no seed. Well, the same day, the Lord made, and he expands the covenant now, not just the area of Canaan, but he adds from the river Egypt, that's the Nile, unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Now, at this point, Sarai decides that she's not going to be able to have any kids. Abraham was 75 and God first told him he would become the father of a nation, and he had no children. For 11 years, from the time that Sarai was 65 and she's now 76, Sarai was beyond normal childbearing age. Now, it was Sarai's idea for Abram to have a child by her maid Hagar. God never told him to do it. In fact, God told Abram that Ishmael would not be his heir. His promised heir would only come through Sarai, the legal wife. Many things had happened to Abraham and Lot over the next 13 years. Ishmael was born, but he was not to be the heir. When Abram was 99, the Lord appeared to Abram and said, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be thou perfect. And Abram fell on his face and talked with him, saying, neither shall thy name anymore be called, and God said, neither shall thy name be anymore be called Abram, thy name shall be called Abraham, for a father of many nations have I made thee. The difference between Abram and Abraham may not mean much to us, but Abram simply means an exalted father. And Abraham means the father of nations. So that made a considerable difference. Here's this guy that had no children or no sons. And this is 24 years after first called Abram, and there's still no heir. Finally, God fulfills the covenant and Isaac is born. Where scripture says that Sarah conceived, bare Abram a son, and Abraham named him Isaac. Abraham circumcised Isaac as God had commanded him. So now the covenant includes the act of circumcision of every male. At the age of 8 days, every male child is to be circumcised. This is a sign of the covenant that carries on through that child's life. He is to be circumcised as a visible sign of the covenant. But note the sequence of Abrahamic covenant. First, God directed that Abraham move to Canaan. Second, Abraham is told that he will have many descendants. Well, God finally came through after 25 years he had a child, a son. Now, the Jaredite covenant is quite different. This is from the book of Ether. I've put the first verse down here because it's Ether chapter 1, verse 6 in the Community of Christ version. He that wrote the record was Ether, and he was a descendant of, and then it goes clear back to Jared. And then it goes and tells about Jared coming forth with his brother and families, along with some others and their families from the great tower at the time that the Lord confounded the language of the people. And the brother of Jared being large and a mighty man, and being a man highly favored of the Lord, for Jared his brother said in him, cry unto the Lord that he will not confound us, that we may not understand our words. And so, summarizing, the brother of Jared goes to God, and it came to pass that Jared spoke unto his brother again, and inquired of the Lord whether he would drive them out of the land. And if he drive us out of the land, cry unto him, whither shall we go? And who knoweth but the Lord will carry us forth to a land which is choice above all earth? And if it be so, let us be faithful to the Lord, that we may receive it for our inheritance. Now, this is the prayer of the brother of Jared, that we will go where you want us to go, but make it a nice place for us for our inheritance. And this is the driving force of that covenant. We'll go where you want us to go. Give us our inheritance. But keep that in mind, because we're going to find that show up more and more. So the Lord gives directions to the brother of Jared to go gather the flocks, male and female of every kind, and also the seed of the earth of every kind. Now, the Jaredite covenant was quite the opposite from the way the Abrahamic covenant worked. God decreed that the people at the tower would be scattered to populate the world. Somehow, the people knew that if their language was confounded, they would not be able to understand each other. Therefore, when the brother of Jared approached God, he essentially said, send us where you will. We have the faith it will be a wonderful place, but please let us keep our language. Thus, the Jaredite covenant started with man asking for God not to confuse their language, and ended with God leading them where and how to go. Now, I'm going to show you the evidence of the covenant with Abraham as it goes through the character's transcript. And I'll come back to the brother of Jared and that Jaredite covenant afterwards. But because I have already made presentations on the character's transcript, let's see what that says about the covenant. This is a code sheet that I use for all the characters of the character's transcript. I'm going to show you where the covenants come in with the character's transcript. Every time you see a small dot, which you can see here, there are 4 of them there. There's one in here. Oh, I missed one. There's one there. Those dots all indicate a promise of God. Every time you see that dot, it means promise. So I call it the dot of promise. That dot of promise represents God's promise to all the descendants of both Abraham and the brother of Jared. I'm going to highlight every instance of those dots of promise by circling them in red. And the dot of promise, remember, is the covenant. Notice that it runs throughout the message. The message reads from right to left, top to bottom. Each one of those is in some way indicating something about a covenant relationship. Now, I'm highlighting both the Abrahamic and Jaredite covenants. The characters transcript uses the same dot of promise to show the covenant relationship, regardless of whether it's from Abraham or Jared source. Now I'm going to separate out some of these. The first one I'm going to separate out is this one. And when we go to the next slide, you'll see that red circle is gone. It'll be moved over to the right. Whoops. What happened? Well, I forgot I slipped this slide in. Okay. The dot of promise is really God's blessing and promise to Abraham that I will bless thee and multiplying thy seed as the stars of the heaven and the sand of the sea. That was given to Abraham after the Isaac sacrifice incident. Again, it was given to Abraham's grandson, Jacob, after he had wrestled with God all night in a slightly different form. I will surely do thee good, and thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. Now, that is the promise that there would be seed for Abraham. Now, here are the ones that I pulled out. This character, I've moved over to here. And there are 4 instances of that character. They're all identified and pulled out of the document over here. And those all meant power. That was the very first word that was revealed to me in my experience in 1994. I won't spend much time on it, but note that these characters off to the right all mean power. And why does that dot of promise represent the word power? Well, the carrot-shaped character that we see in B21, which is right here, is not very much different from this. There's a difference only in the dot of promise. The dot of promise is in here, but it's not here. And that character represents the Spirit, the third person in the Trinity, the God that interacts with us humans in our earthly lives. That character with a dot of promise means power, for there is no power greater than the promise of God. If God makes a promise, he will honor that promise, maybe not when we think he should do so, but in his time and in his wisdom. Now I've pulled out a different set. These all mean the same thing. This is by the gift of God. Each one of these characters is by the gift of God, except for, well, this one is by the gift of God, but this is for covenant people. This character at B17 right here means this is a covenant people. If you take that character and you put it with this one right here, you have a gift of God to covenant people. So without the dots, that's a gift of God to people. That's the Gentiles. Note that I'm isolating characters. What happened? Okay, here's another set of characters that I've isolated out. I'm not going to spend any time on this, but these are all slightly different, all dealing with the dot of promise. This particular one, which is right here, I identified originally with the coding as 3 separate characters. But really, once I got into studying them, they should all have been put together like this. They were copied as 3 separate characters, but that should have been a single character. And this is the dot of promise of the Jaredites. This one, the dot of promise preserved by Christ, preserved of Christ, it refers to the Abrahamic covenant. This one refers to the Abrahamic covenant. I can tell that from what the text says in each area. And by the time we get to this point, every single one of these that we still have identified here is the name of a person in which the dot of promise of the covenant is a part of his name. This one is of Mormon. This is Laman. This happens to be Moroni, but it is spelled in a different way than how Moroni pronounces his name. This is the way Moroni writes his own name down here. But this is of son of Mormon. Well, the son of Mormon was Moroni. Moroni here is saying that this portion of the information for the Gentiles will go into the brass plates. But every one of these is the name of a person. Here we have a mixture of the Jaredite. This is the book of, this is Ether's name, and this is Laman's name. Here's Ether's name and Laman's name. We got both the Jaredite and the Abraham covenants here. And it says here indeed that these are covenant peoples. Down here again, we have Moroni's name, and the last 3 are Mormon's name. This one has a line in it that means record of Mormon. So that particular one is talking about the Book of Mormon itself. Thus, you see, if we put them all back in there, we have covenant people running from one end of that document to the other. That's all we're going to say about the Abrahamic covenant. So I want to get to the Jaredite journey now. I'm going to be open for comment and critique. I want you to feel free to write down questions if you disagree with anything I say. I'm getting too old to do any further research. I have other priorities, but I'm going to give you the result of what I think the Jaredite journey was. And I invite anyone to follow up this presentation with further research to go any direction that it leads, because I'm interested in the truth. I've not got full truth here because I'm incapable of knowing everything that's true. Therefore, what I'm giving you here is my understandings and impressions right now. I'm going to give you some new hypotheses and concepts on the Jaredite journey. I think a usual assumption is that a body of maybe up to 200 people traveled from the Tower of Babel to the Promised Land in 8 barges following Jared. And that would be about 25 people per barge. Now, I'm going to assume that that's wrong. I'm going to assume that the body of travelers was much larger. God was migrating people, and he was repeatedly getting dropouts along the way, people who settled or migrated and went in new directions. So the number that actually followed Jared to the Promised Land was much smaller than what would originally started out. Now, those are assumptions I make. You may disagree with it, but let's continue on with these assumptions. Another new assumption. I believe that the Jaredites remembered the story of Enoch and the city of Zion. In Hebrew, Zion is spelled as it shows it here, Tzadeh, Vav, and so on. Those are 4 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. But I finally discovered what the word Zion means. It means conspicuous or outstanding. And we're going to be talking about Zion because it, I believe, left its message throughout China on the trip that the Jaredites took. Now, restorationists are the only ones that know the story of Enoch City called Zion. Let me read it from the inspired version of the Bible. And the Lord called his people Zion because they were of one heart, of one mind. They dwelled in righteousness, and there were no poor among them. And Enoch continued his preaching unto the people of God. It came to pass in his days, he built a city that was called a city of holiness, even Zion. And it came to pass that Enoch talked with the Lord. And he said unto the Lord, surely Zion shall dwell in safety forever. And it came to pass that the Lord showed unto Enoch all the inhabitants of the earth. And he beheld, and lo, Zion in the process of time was taken up into heaven. And the Lord said unto Enoch, behold, mine abode forever. As I said, restorationists are the only ones that know this story. It comes from the inspired version of the Bible. It was given through Joseph Smith Jr. and Sidney Rignan's inspired study of the King James Version. But I feel confident that the Jaredites knew that story of Enoch and the city of Zion that took place prior to Noah's flood. So let's study that a little bit. Now, I've deleted some of the verses of this so that it stands up a little better, but the entire story in the inspired version is chapters 3 through 7 of the book of Genesis. And it's a great expansion of what's in the King James Version of the Bible. The first portion of that expansion is also found in the Community of Christ, section 22, Doctrine and Covenants, as a revelation given during the Bible studies of Joseph and Sidney Rigdon. Near the end of the inspired version segment is also a revelation, Doctrine and Covenants, section 76. Both of those revelations were given in June of 1830. Now, those revelations are not in the LDS Doctrine and Covenants, but the entirety of those inspired version chapters are, in the book of Moses in the LDS Pearl of Great Price. I don't know whether any other branches of the Restoration have this information in their scriptures or not, as I've not studied it in any of the other versions of the Restoration movement. I now have repeated that same scripture in the from Genesis inspired version, and now I've added to it the book of Ether. And here is the reason I'm tying these together. It came to pass that Jared spake again to his brother, saying, Go and inquire of the Lord whether he will drive us out of the land. And if he will drive us out of the land, cry unto him, Whither shall we go? And all who knoweth the Lord will carry us forth into a land which is choice above all the earth. And if it so be, let us be faithful unto the Lord, that we may receive it for our inheritance. This is why I believe that they knew of the city of Zion. They already had a vision from, it would be an oral tradition at that point. But the Jaredites knew the story of Eden. They knew the beautiful life of the ancient city of Zion. They wanted a special land for their inheritance. And that's what drove them to go to the new land, to follow the Lord. They wanted to find such an ideal place to live, and they envisioned scenic city of Zion as their goal, their objective, what they were traveling for. We probably all know the book of Genesis gives the lineage of Adam, Seth, Enos, and so on, down to Noah. The latter part of that lineage is shown on this slide. A man by the name of Jared had a son who was Enoch. Now, this Jared is not the same one as the Jared in the Jaredite journey, probably named for him, but it's not the same man, probably a period of 1,000 to 2,000 years between those two men. But those patriarchs lived very long lives according to the Bible. Let us summarize the story of Enoch and the city of Zion. Enoch was a prophet who preached to his people and taught them how to live together in love. The city of Zion was full of people so compassionate that God proclaimed them to be of one heart. They were so attentive and attuned to each other that they truly listened to each other. And so God proclaimed them to be of one mind. They dwelt in righteousness and shared what they had with each other. There were no poor among them. From those who had to those who have not. The Bible says that Zion existed for 365 years before Enoch and all the people of Zion were taken away as mortals and became, guess what? Immortals, dwelling with God in heaven. In the Bible, in Revelation 21, we see Zion descending from heaven and called the New Jerusalem. So Enoch's story in the inspired version ends with the entire population of the city of Enoch being taken to heaven, as well as Enoch himself. The brother of Jared and his people would have known the oral tradition of Zion being taken to heaven, where it would become the abode of God himself. I believe there is evidence of that to be found in modern China, and I'm going to show you some of that evidence tonight. Looking at this map, let's see where the Jaredites really were in terms of our modern world. This is the area of the Tigris and Euphrates River in Mesopotamia, where the Tower of Babel was built. And here we have the Black Sea. That's the Crimean Peninsula of Ukraine. And this plain right here is in Russia, where we got the war going on now. This is Turkey, sticking out into the Mediterranean Sea, which borders onto Israel right here. So here are the people right on the Tigris or the Euphrates River and the Tower of Babel. And the question is, what was the route of the migration to the New World? Now, in this forum, I've heard someone talk about a trip that they said thought it came down the central part of the Arabian Peninsula and stopped at an area which the Nephites called Bountiful and took off from there to take their journey across the ocean. Now, brothers and sisters, that to me is all desert. There's hardly anything in there but desert. And I don't think it at all fits the description of the Book of Mormon, description of the journey. So back here. Here at the Tower of Babel is the family of Jared and his brother. The Book of Mormon tells us more about their trip than most people recognize. I say that the journey was eastward, across the Caspian Sea, across the Aral Sea. Well, the Aral Sea is so dried up nowadays that they don't even show it on the map sometimes. This one doesn't show it. Other seas that they crossed to get over into China and then down China through the Yellow River to the Yellow Sea. Now, I'm going to tell you why I think that was the route that they took. Most likely that Yellow Sea is the area where they built the 8 barges and launched them in eastern China. I'm going to give evidence of that journey, both from the Book of Mormon description and today's evidence with China itself. Now here from the Book of Ether is a description. Jared and his brother went down into the valley, which was northward. Well, here they are down here. If they went into the valley, which was northward, they had to cross over the mountains of eastern Turkey into Russia. And there they would face the Caspian Sea. Now, along the Caspian Sea are mountains. They head all the way across Asia up into Siberia. On this side of the Caspian Sea are mountains. This is the Himalayan mountains here. That's ice that you see on the Himalayan mountains. You're not going over that for a migration. Okay, they went into the valley, which was northward. And the Lord commanded them that they should go forth into the wilderness, yea, into a quarter where there never had been. Came to pass, the Lord did go before them, did walk with them or talk with them as he stood in a cloud and gave directions whither they should travel. Now, the Jaredites called that valley of Nimrod. Nimrod was a grandson of Noah. To the west lies the Black Sea, to the east is the Caspian Sea and the Aral Sea, and so on. As I said, the Aral Sea is almost dried up today. Many maps don't show it. Continuing east are other bodies of water. They're going through lowland regions with mountain ranges running along both the north and the south. And here it tells how they journeyed. As they traveled in the wilderness, they did build barges, which they did cross many waters, being directed continually by the hand of the Lord. And now I proceed with my record, for behold, it came to pass, the Lord did bring Jared and his brethren forth to that great sea, which divideth the lands. Oh, wow. We already got to the end of China. So the Jaredite crossed many waters. I interpret that as meaning that they repeatedly built barges as they came to new bodies of water. But this short account doesn't mention all about that journey through China. Suddenly they're at the Great Sea that I interpret as being the Pacific Ocean. I'm going to do what Moroni does and skip the China part of the trip for the moment. I want to describe how I envision the journey to have taken place. Now, this is a schematic just to show you that where mountains are, where the lower level is. The light color is the plains, and the dark green is mountainous. This represents the Caspian Sea. So here's my stylized take on the process. Point A represents the western shore of the Caspian Sea. There, the Jaredites find different kinds of local grains, and they prepare fields for growing massive amounts of grain to serve as their food for the journey. They were also told to gather flocks and honeybees for their trip, not for the purpose of taking them to the New World, but for sustaining them as they journeyed. They would use their flocks to make clothing, tents, ropes, and so on along the journey. After they had planted the fields, they cut down native trees and made a single boat, barge-shaped, that sat high in the water. And after the barge was built, they took the barge across with a contingent of people who cleared the land, sowed seed, sent the barge back, got more people, back and forth, people, flocks, seed, food. At each step, they would have to stop, continue getting more seed and food. Finally, they would have enough to migrate across this plain till they found a lake. They could see they could need to get across it, so they built a barge, planted some more grain here. While they were building the barge, the grain was growing. They shipped some of the grain and people across to the other side. And you see, they would continue this all the way across to China, which I have identified as D here. They repeated this process all the way, moving eastward across Asia. until they got to that one point. At each point they encountered a body of water, they planted the crops, built a barge, and continued across. We'll get to the problem of getting into China in a little bit, but again, I'm skipping it now and going to get to where they built the 8 barges. So they've gone across this part here. They reached up here, they've gone into China. We'll talk about how a little later. They are at the point where they called it Mariancum, and they pitched their tents. They've crossed down through the Yellow Sea, Yellow River to the Yellow Sea, and will build 8 barges to cross the Pacific Ocean. Those barges that cross the Pacific Ocean are of an entirely different type of structure from the barges that they used, which is described as being light on the water, like a fowl on the water. You've all seen a duck float on the water. They're high in the water. When it came to the barges, they had a barge that was tight, like into a dish, and it was locked down when the waters came over it, so that much of the time water was over them. So these barges were of a different design. Mariancum is the name of the place that they called it, where they dwelt in tents upon the seashore for the space of 4 years. So for the moment, let's not consider that trip through China, get to the Yellow Sea. What is going to happen when they build the barge with the families of Jared and the brother of Jared? Well, when they finally launch out, they build their 8 going barges and start the trip. There's nothing to indicate that those barges were tethered together. They are free floating. The prevailing winds and the ocean currents would carry them generally northeastward, but shifting in different directions, they would land at different places. Suppose one landed at someplace in Alaska, another along the western coast of Canada, or the United States, or Mexico, or down here in the Central America, Mexico, Guatemala era. They could have gone all the way down to the tip of South America in some of those barges. In short, by our day, the DNA of the Jaredites would have extended from the northernmost area of Alaska to the southernmost tip of South America. Now, there are no Middle Eastern animals or grain in the Western Hemisphere, so the Jaredites consumed almost everything they brought with them during the trip. And when they arrived, they found maize, yams, potatoes, squash, and founded their new food sources on local animals and plants. Now I'd like to consider the probable trip through China before they got to the building of the 8 barges. We'll start the western edge of China, up about here. And how did they get past a 3,000-mile wall of mountains that stretch south? Here is the mountain range right along here in northern China. Goes right to here until you get to this point where there's a big hole. And then that mountain range continues on up. This is the only opening in that mountain range over a distance of 3,000 miles. I'm going to give you a proposal of what happened. The Zungarian Gate is what that hole is called. It borders on Kazakhstan, and this is China down on this side. Kazakhstan's over there. This is called the Zungarian Gate. It's part of the Silk Road that runs northwest to the border of China. This is the single gap in that mountain range where people could cross. This was about the only path that one could get into China from Western Asia. I believe there was a mountain that was on that other side of the lake when the brother of Jared got there. I know this is an audacious claim, but actually the incident is referred to in the Book of Mormon. And it's in Ether 5. That's it, chapter 12 of the LDS version. Moroni has finished his work on these plates. He is praying to the Lord that the Gentiles in the future will listen, because he's having difficulty struggling to make his words understood. And suddenly you come up with this statement. The Lord came to him and said, I will confound the people who say that my words are not are difficult. So brother of Moroni is comforted and says, thy will be done. I know thou workest among the children of men according to their faith. For the brother of Jared said to the mountain, Zirin, removed, and it was removed. In abridging his Jaredite record, Moroni omitted everything about Mount Zirin. But in this chapter of Ether, Moroni is using that incident as a wonderful act of faith on the part of the brother of Jared. Almost certainly, something dug a mountain-sized hunk of rock out of that gap. And I believe it was so the Jaredites could get through as they were led by God. And I attribute it to the power of God through the faith of the brother of Jared. Now let's consider the trip through China. The Zungarian Gap is up about here. And all this is mountainous down here. Zungarian Gap allows you to go into the river basin. And hey, that river basin is actually uphill for the rest of the journey. They're going downhill. That means they're following the river. I expect when they got to a place where there was plenty of timber and the rivers ran deep enough that they would temporarily settle to grow more crops and to build barges. It's easier to float down a river than to walk along the shoreline. And oh, they knew how to build barges. On the other hand, when you float down a river, you don't stop the boat to grow new grain. So they'd have to stop somewhere to replant and harvest when their food supply was running low. And I think that critical point with their food supply running low was about in here at a city that is called Sion, spelled in English maps as Xian. something important happened at Sion. Archaeologists tell us that about 6,000 years ago, a fairly large group of people made a permanent settlement there. They've excavated the site of that settlement. Now, I've been to Sion, but at the way the weather was going at that time, I was unable to see anything of that original settlement, and I was unaware of its importance at that time. But apparently those ancient travelers very much liked the place, for they called it, and I'm going to spell it with a Z. They spelled it Zion, for I believe that's the story of Enoch City, was well known to the Jaredites, and they are the very people that first built that city and called it the city of Zion. They thought they had finally found the wonderful, bountiful land the Lord was taking them to. What evidence do we have that they called this place Zion? I believe the Jaredite settlement there is the source of the story that was twisted over generations of retelling. The ancient religion of Taoism still exists today, and that ancient religion calls Sion the city of 8 immortals. Immortals in Zion? Kind of reminiscent of the whole city being carried, of mortals being carried off to heaven. But the actual meaning of Zion is totally lost on people of China today, for they know nothing of what Zion means. I suggest you Google the 8 immortals of Sion, Xian, and see what it says. I'm going to read one of the articles I found from Wikipedia. The 8 immortals are a group of legendary Sion, and then it calls these, puts them in parentheses and says that means immortals. Each immortal's power can be transferred to a vessel that can bestow life or destroy evil. Together, these 8 vessels are called the covert 8 immortals. Most of them are said to have been born in the Tang or Song dynasty. They are referred to by the Taoists and are also popular elements in Chinese culture. They are said to live on a group of 5 islands in the Bohai Sea, which includes Mount Penglai. The picture on the left is the same as the one we saw on the previous slide, but a bit smaller so we can point out another very interesting point. Up here at the top is a scale, 100 miles. That arrow represents the length of 100 miles. From Sion here, we have the same picture over here. I have outlined 7 areas that have alternate spellings of Sion. There is no place else in China that this is true. Well northwest of Sion, up here, is Wan Sion. Just southwest of that is Long Sion, a bit east, and halfway to Sion itself is Xianyang. And south of that are 2 cities that are about 20 miles separating them, Yangxian and Xi'an. And southeast of Xi'an itself are 2 cities of Xi'an and Fangxian. All of those cities named after Zion. Well, I'll give you my opinion and let others see if they can find support to reject my position. Yes. I'd run it through a Google translation. Long Sion means Long Zion. What the long is in its Chinese meaning, I don't know. Wan Sion means change Zion. Kion Sion means the first Zion. Sion Yang means raise first. Yang Sion means Yang Zion. Si Sion means west. But if you split that into two words, it means West Zion. And Fang Sion is anti-Zion. I really believe that that is the center of the population of the Chinese. I find it fascinating that the Jaredite migration probably represented the greatest dispersion of people around the world. Obviously, my suppositions must be wrong in some ways. I would welcome anyone to study what I've shown here and see if there's further support for it. But I must admit, it's all hypothetical. And that's the end of my presentation. I'm sorry I was so long. I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Blair. Wonderful presentation. I'm sure Paul probably has the first question ready.
Of course, I thank you, Blair. It's refreshing to have someone so audacious to put forward so much for people to take shots at. But what an overall master plan this is, and what a remarkable study. And I'm quite impressed with your 8 xians. That really is a revealing concentration. I would like for you, if you would please, to give us the corollary, because my understanding of the Book of Mormon is that it fundamentally is a guide for the Promised Land. And you're telling us here, I believe, that we have 2 covenants, which are Promised Land kind of covenants.
Yes.
And I have previously suggested that I think the Book of Mormon is indicating that everyone is entitled to Promised Land. Perhaps my audacity and yours fit together here, or perhaps you take mine apart.
Well, if you take the position of those people who are migrating, when they got to a place that was so appealing to them that they would settle down, they thought they got to the Promised Land. They were fulfilled, and from China they move up into Russia, into Siberia, and down into Southeast Asia. But that, I believe, was the heart of the Jaredite migration, and they left a lot of people in China. There may have been a couple hundred people that went on, and I've got further slides that I could show you that I think prove that there only was one barge that got to the American continents that we call the Jaredite nation.
Wow, I'm so impressed, but I do want to yield to the other people. Now let me call your attention to the fact that you can go to the reactions button at the bottom and raise your hand to be recognized. And we have them on duty to try to keep us in order and recognize us. I'm just, I'm most intrigued. Let me go back to your point about DNA, where we had Stuart Symington indicate that the DNA of the first Americans is out of Asia, not out of the Middle East. And so your explanation, if I understand you correctly, is that we have an extended migration by the Jaredites from the Tower of Babel across China, we're probably talking about more than one generation, multiple generations, or at least ultimately it would have been.
May have,
Yeah,
may have taken 100 years or so.
yeah. So long-term migration to do that, and then by the time all that migration gets to the Americas, then yeah, you are looking at a DNA that is Asian. Remarkable, fascinating. All right, ladies and gentlemen, he's open to questions and answers. Here's your chance.
Monty, you had your hand up. Did you still have your question?
Don't tell me Monty doesn't have a comment.
I forgot what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
Now, look, folks, what I have given you is a result of studies that go way back. And it's all come together relatively recently. The idea of Xi'an, when I first visited Xi'an in 1984, I had no idea of that being a Jaredite settlement. I thought, yeah, sure. I had no idea of the being Zion until, probably 20 years ago. And it first occurred to me.
Well, let me ask Blair, you're talking about the ancient picture, but project for us into the future. Where do we stand in terms of the redeeming of Zion and its return?
Well, I'm working on another book. It's called Life After Life. And I am researching all of the things that the Bible says about life after life. I go into the Jewish concept of Sheol, which was the place of the dead to the ancient Hebrews. And this is going to be a mystery, I think, to us until it comes to pass. But we are in the process, I believe, of developing Zion. And I believe that this forum, Paul, is one that is bringing people together and helping to mold them into common, into a position of common understanding, so that the Lord can say, we are of one heart, we're of one mind, and we dwell in righteousness, and therefore we can be called Zion, outstanding, conspicuous, and we're in the process. And if you look at all of the Gospels that talk about the last days, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 22, you will find that an important part of all of them is the gathering of the elect. It's there. It's in the Bible. There will be a gathering of the believers. We haven't seen that yet. But when we see that, I think we're going to know we're very, very close.
Thanks, Blair. Ron Smith has his hand up. Good evening, Ron. It's your turn.
Good evening. I have two questions, and they're somewhat related. First, several years ago, I saw a book about the story of Genesis and the Chinese characters, where they were looking at Chinese characters and taking them apart and seeing different, different things about the Genesis story there. Have you pursued that particular avenue at all?
My son gave me that book just before I went to China.
Oh, yeah.
I was looking for that material as I was in China in 1984.
Uh-huh.
I asked our guide about a couple of things in it, and he didn't speak English well enough to convey to me what it really meant. But yes, I have a copy of that book. Here it is.
Yeah. Okay.
Discovery Genesis. And I have a slide that I can show you, and I would recommend it. If you want to take a look at it, I'll talk you through a couple of things. Do we have time?
Well, I had a different question. I would just, I mean, sometime I'd like to sit down with you and look at some of that, because I know it would take a while to do it. I was interested. You said that you thought that they would have known the story of Enoch from their oral tradition. If Jared and his brother or somebody couldn't write, we wouldn't have had ether, being able to record it. And I was wondering if there was a particular reason why you said that it should have been oral tradition as opposed to a written understanding.
Well, I wouldn't put it past written understanding, but at least oral.
Okay. That's fine. I just thought maybe there was some particular evidence or reason that you had put it in terms of oral. So appreciate that. Thank you. Oh, by the way, but while I've still got the floor, I guess, I thought that I've always thought that going to the land northward and then, in the northward direction and then crossing the seas made sense about going across China. And I don't know where I got the idea, but a long time ago, I heard somebody say about that particular mountain. And I've always thought that was fascinating. I wonder where the mountain went.
I don't know if you know Eric Scott.
No. I know Glenn
Okay.
Scott, but I don't know if that's
Glenn
any-
Scott is his father.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Eric Scott is the one that told me about the Tsungarian Gap,
Yeah,
and it fit nicely with the story.
absolutely.
So the mountain of Zern.
Thank you.
And I think Glenn Scott's book is another one that proposes the Jaredite migration across Asia. So I don't happen to remember the title of that book. I do have it here on my shelf, but I would recommend it as another interesting resource to support your claim. And Blair, let me say thank you, because you gave one of the finest compliments that anyone has ever given for the Book of Mormon Perspectives Forum. That we are able to share together and potentially have a meeting of the minds that speaks of at least a fundamental germination of the concept of Zion. There is clearly the intent behind it, and I am so pleased to have it identified and have people participating in it with belief that we can actually influence and nurture the seeds of Zion being grown now.
Thank you for your work.
Absolutely. James Lucas, your turn, please. Go ahead, James. Welcome tonight.
Thank you. And thank you, Blair. That was absolutely fascinating. Just to add to the collection of references with that Ron and Paul have added to you, in a long time ago in the LDS tradition, Hugh Nibley, in his book, The World of the Jaredites, also proposed essentially crossed Asia, across the Northern Pacific route for the Jaredites. So that's another source of an authority that came to similar conclusions to you. One interesting possibility, and this is, I don't know if you've looked into this, or it certainly would be something that if you haven't, it might be a future subject, would be to compare DNA results for folks from that particular part of China to Native American DNA. My understanding, and I'm very much not an expert on this, so if I'm saying things that are inaccurate, I won't be surprised. But my understanding is that Native American DNA tends to be fall within fairly narrow ranges for DNA, and this is from all across the Americas. And but that DNA, its closest Asian match is from Eastern Siberia, not China particularly. But I, don't know how close the Eastern Siberian cousins to Native Americans from a DNA point of view are to folks from that particular part of China that you've postulated might be have been a major resting stop or route or source for the Jaredite peoples. But anyway, I don't know if you have any reactions to that. I'd be interested, but just suggest that as being another avenue of potential research.
Oh, I think that's an avenue of research that I would like somebody to grab and run with, but I can't do it. Tomorrow's my 91st birthday, and I'm getting to the end of my age. So I don't know. I'm not going to dig into it any further. I offer it to all of you, and I'm willing to tell you where I've got my material from. If you just ask me, I can send you the material that I have, but I have basically integrated all of the things that that I gave into one whole that makes sense to me. If you figure that maybe 500 people started out with that group, you've got all sorts of DNA mixtures that could have gone one direction or another. Certainly, the M3 DNA, the maternal DNA, of mitochondrial DNA for the Americas and the Eastern Asia, Siberia region, as you point out, is the would have to be answered in some way, because it's not the people that are in China that have that DNA. But you've got a host of people that were going with Jared, as I see it. And was only one barge that
Right.
made it with the Jaredites.
Right. But no, those are all, good points. Well, fortunately, our Perspectives Forum is recorded, so we have some record for all these different suggestions and your kind offer for someone else to pick up where you've carried the research to. I don't know if I'm that person either, but it's at least you've put it on the record, on the public record.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Wanda, it's your turn. Go ahead, please.
I have in my hand 3 different articles on Chinese civilization and the Book of Mormon and other 2 more articles. But it's from recent Book of Mormon developments, part 1. And the first one was written by Sherry Smith, and she talked about the civilization. And the second one was Chinese stone anchors, written by Shirley is it Heater?
Heater, Shirley Heater.
Right. I can't see small print anymore because I'm 1 year older than you, Bill, or Bryant.
I'm going to keep going with you.
But I'm going to be 93 in August. So, and then the third one is the Chinese language in the Book of Mormon, written by Raymond Treat. And I first encountered these because I knew one of the people that was working on the Book of Mormon and the Hebrew language, and found out about these articles. And so that's when I first realized that that was a possibility. And I think Edward Butterworth wrote a little bit about that in some of his books. And he thought maybe they came up across Australia when they left China. So those were just some comments I thought you might be interested in. There are 2 books of these recent Book of Mormon developments, and this one is bound, and you can see it here. The other one was loose leaf, and I put it in this loose notebook so that I can keep it together. But
Are those from the Zarahemla research?
yeah,
Those books.
that was
Zarahemla.
from Raymond Treat's group, yes.
Yeah.
And that's where I got my information about the covenant presentation I gave that Bill or Brian Blair,
It's all right.
showed at the beginning. I missed it because I had my head turned or something, but that he got his idea partly from that he could present his presentation tonight. So I've got lots of good handouts in my course from these Zarahemla records.
Yeah.
That's all I had to say.
Ray Treat did a lot of good work.
Thanks, Wanda.
And it should be noted too that Blair Bryant and Wanda Stubbert, both in their 90s, have done a lot of really good work. And our forum is enriched and honored to have you share, present, and to deliver to us the wealth of information that you've encountered. I would like to emphasize that with people in their 90s giving our presentations and sharing their life research, that there's an opening for younger people to get on the ball and start catching up, because I believe the call to Zion is one that requires another generation to pick up the spectrum, to pick up the cause, the intellecty of the dream, and make it happen. Because those of us that are on the dying out edge, not only need to leave behind, but we need to leave vitality behind that will carry it into the next generation. I do appreciate we do have some younger people participating, but I think we need to do a better job of engendering to our youth the messages of the Book of Mormon, and especially this call to build up the cause of Zion. Thank you, Blair. I'm so pleased because to me it is such a beautiful, powerful, and urgent call for us to do the things that you have called our attention as covenant to do tonight. We are a covenant people. And while we make divisions among ourselves, to be a covenant people that are able to, as you suggest, to think together, have our hearts beat together, and ultimately share together so that there's no poor, that all of us can be able to prosper in our own promised land. That is an amazing thing. And it's an amazing prospect. And I'm delighted that we get to do this forum. I would like to encourage all of you to invite younger people to join us, because that, I think, is essential for the fulfillment of the call. Sorry if I talk too much. The floor should still be open for more questions and answers. I have another one for you, Blair. You mentioned the 8 barges leaving China, but only one, you think, made it to where the Jaredites left their record, which suggests that that the others perhaps did not have someone literate with them, or we just haven't found that yet.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised, but what there are other records among those other peoples, but so far we only know of the Jaredite one because that's the one that got to the Book of Mormon. Yeah, there's an interesting quote in the Book of Mormon about how many people there were. Whoops. It says that the brother of Jared and Jared, as they were getting older, decided to gather all their heirs together and count them so that they would know how many they had. It turns out that the brother of Jared had 22 descendants and Jared had 12. Now, that's only 34 people. That was the total when brother Jared and Jared were old enough to die. So they had been in the promised land for some time. And even if Jared's wife and the wives of his 4 sons had all died, it specifically says that he had 4 sons. There only put room for 8 grandchildren. That's all that were in that barge. That's how many were in their society. At that stage.
Wow. You've given us some ponderables, my friend. Fascinating. But I'm intrigued that with your 8 barges spreading down the western coast of America, that does help explain some of the linguistic continuity. Brother Stubbs pointed out that we have in the Uto-Aztecan connection spread from California down all the way through Mexico, of the Uto-Aztecan family, and and he saw several hundred vesicular cognates to the Semitic languages there, and so that certainly would seem to support what you're saying.
Also, the idea that the civilizations in Peru and in California, they had a similar source.
Well, in the presentation I made a couple of years ago about the Olmec, showing the epicanthic fold in the eyes of Olmec statues, suggesting Chinese origin for some of the Olmec art. Again, that would appear to be another prime area for potential research.
Yep. Somebody grab it and run. I can't do any more on it.
Well, I suddenly have a little bit more time available now, but unfortunately, with my computer having been moved for hospice and back home again, a whole bunch of files have gotten scrambled and lost. And so I
Uh-oh.
start over on some books that unless I can get Dropbox to come back with information on files that have got misplaced. But I may have to start over on some books that are already in process. But yeah, I find this absolutely a fascinating area for study, and I would be happy to host any additional presentations that people would like to come up with on their supporting or countering research.
Right.
We're looking for the truth, and this is a fascinating glimpse that Blair has offered us tonight of an alternative that isn't very much considered, I think. There's some of you with us that haven't normally been with us, and I would invite you to put your email in the chats or send it to Deb or to myself and get yourself on the regular mailing. Next week, we have Steve Smith on the schedule to present about Joseph Smith III at the Liberty Hall in Lamoni. And week after that, I believe we go back to the resolutions for the Community of Christ conference. And by the way, I am needing 2 more people to volunteer to help with presenting those resolutions. That's simply a 10-minute sketch, one on the Christian Zionism resolution and the other on the marriage resolution. So any of you that can be enticed, talk with me about it, and I'd be very pleased to have your 10-minute report. Mr. Lucas, pardon, go ahead.
One thing, notice in the chat, David Spencer asked to be included in your mailings.
Right.
There you go.
James,
Okay.
what's that, Paul?
Yeah, just another quick question for Blair. This is sort of closing the loops and completing the connections. Jerry Grover has worked on this is on the characters document. Jerry Grover has worked on the characters document. And if I'm remembering correctly, at the previous Perspectives Forum, you had, where Jerry was presenting, you had talked to him about connecting with him to compare your work on the characters document. I'm just curious if you're ever able to do that, or if you're still independent bodies of research on that particular document.
The answer to that is yes. I have been in contact with him. I have taken his suggestions of places to go for research and verify. I still have serious questions about it. And I have asked him to not worry about it anymore. We are on such different tracks that we cannot talk reasonably about it because we have such different basic assumptions that we exclude each other.
Okay.
We've agreed to disagree.
Okay. I hope amicably, right? Amicably agree degrees. Okay. Okay, well, thank
Yes.
you. I just wanted to kind of close that. Was
Jerry's
curious
an
what happened with that.
Jerry's an engineer. He loves mathematics. He sees mathematics in everything that he's got. And I cannot see the mathematics that he sees. I am not a mathematician. I did study a lot of science, but I can't do a calculus problem. So that is not the area of our problem, though. Our area of problem is our assumptions.
Okay. All right, thank you. No, that's just was curious as to what had happened with that. Oh, and happy 91st birthday.
Thank you very much.
Now, I have been copied on most of that exchange, and I would agree that it has been an amicable exchange in which they have agreed to continue their research. There is a possibility of some convergence, but there's also enough disagreement and enough difference in the basic assumptions to make it so it's tough to find that convergence. I would like to invite everyone, since tomorrow is his birthday, and I find that to have people sing happy birthday on the Zoom can be most enlightening. And so you don't have to try to stay together. You don't have to try to sing harmony, but sing out loud, and let's all sing to Blair Bryant a happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday,
dear
dear
Blair.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday to you.
and many
I've
more.
heard that song sung and off keys, but this atonal
Hey, that's
synchronized
that's
goes.
the culmination of the Perspectives Forum.
Yeah,
Thank you, folks. Wouldn't help, Wanda.
Oh, thank you for directing us, Wanda.
Voice is weak.
Sandra put a comment in the chat there, Blair. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I love to hear things that expand my thoughts, and 8 barges landing at 8 different places in 8 cities of Zion in China makes me want to read and study more. Thank you again, Sandra Morgan. Thank you, Sandra. So I have a question, and it isn't necessarily about the topic, but I'm in the process of reading the Book of Mormon through for the first time. And I'm on about page 500 of the Restored Covenant edition. And do they ever say what the brother of Jared's name is? And if not, why don't they?
Well, I don't know why, but no, his name is never given in the Book of Mormon. He's always the brother of Jared.
In the LDS, among the LDS, there's a tradition that his name was Mahonri Mori Ankamer, and Brigham Young had a son who was even named that. And some other people actually got stuck with that as a given name because of that tradition, that it was Mahonri Mori Ankamer.
Wow.
Where did Mori Ankamer come from?
I have no idea.
Well, that was what they called their landing in what I believe was the Yellow Sea, where they pitched their tents for the 4 years before they built the barges.
If that really was his name, I can see why they just call him the brother of Jared.
Yes.
I always thought he had a name like Wilberforce or something like that, you know.
Deb, I have heard the story that in the time that they lived, he was a leader of the people. And so they didn't want their name to be known because it might be used in some kind of witchery or something. And so that's why he was referred to as the brother of Jared. I've heard that theory.
Thank
So
you.
anyway, that has some explanation that you can possibly relate to. It's like maybe a title, the president, you know,
Right.
so that he didn't want his name to be available for black magic.
Thanks, Wanda. Okay, Monty, go ahead.
Yeah, my thing is, as long as the Lord knows who he is, what difference does it make?
Right, right. I'm sure the Lord knows him.
I have one other birthday question for Blair. Is it tomorrow? So do you realize your birthday is Pi Day?
Oh, yeah. Pi Day.
Okay, okay.
That's
I
what
have
like.
a shirt I plan to wear tomorrow that has a big character pi over a spiral where it starts 3.14159625 and goes around and round and round. It
Ah.
fades off to infinity. Yes, it's Pi Day tomorrow. Also the birthday of Albert Einstein.
Oh, wow.
On the back of your t-shirt, you need a big lemon meringue pie.
Oh, that goes in the face.
I hesitate to shut us down tonight. It's been fun. I've already sung. Probably better the singing of happy birthday than for me to try to sing us out. And since I no longer have Rita here to help sing it out, then maybe you're better off to continue asking questions. I don't see any more hands. And so I'll sing. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord lift up his face to shine on you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord lift up his face to shine on you. Good night.
Thank you, Paul.